Yeah, so can you hear me better than you usually do? Let's see. Good morning, or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. And so I'm starting my meeting, my week 12 meeting, just a tad early. It is about 1:11 p.m. my time, 4:11 your time. And this is going to be the last, very last lecture I'm going to be making for this class. And I'm trying out my new microphone, so hopefully you can hear me. So I don't know if I sound better if I go like this. I feel like I'm a singer or something like that. So this way you don't have to hear the glitches. And if it sounds better if I put it far away or close. So all of this is still a experiment. And if you can't hear me, you can always unmute yourself and tell me that you can't hear me. This should make the lecture sound a lot clearer because a lot of students were saying that they were getting glitches and audio glitches. So hopefully that this microphone will make the difference. And I hope that you have a fun time learning the very last lesson that I'm going to have for this class. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to start sharing my screen. All right, so this is going to be the very last lecture. Seems like there's only one student so far in this class, but we're still early. And so in this class, we're going to do a review of English sentence structure. We're going to review compound complex sentence, comparison contrast, transition words. Then we're going to do different kinds of introduction paragraphs, different kinds of body paragraphs, different kinds of conclusion paragraphs, revision versus proofreading, and your week 12 assignment and rubric. And so basically for this class, it's just about over. All you have to do is just put in your week 11 evaluation. Oh, and don't forget, there are two different kinds of evaluations. You have the evaluation that you fill out in the week 11 forum. And then also when you press your student evaluations on the left side of your Canvas classroom, that's a different evaluation. That evaluation comes from the school, and the school will give you a form that you fill out. And it's that evaluation that I don't have privy to, and it's that evaluation that's anonymous, and it's that evaluation that the school uses to gather data about how students are faring in the classes. So if you're having glitches with a Zoom or something, you can mention it there. Or if you really love the class, you can mention it there. The school wants you to know that they really value your comments, and it's from your comments and your questions that the school will then know how to improve future classes for future students. So without further ado, I'm going to start this lesson. And also, if you have any questions and any comments about the audio, whether the audio improved over this time versus last time, you can also email me and tell me if the microphone made a difference. Because this is in response to the feedback I got last week about the Zoom recordings not quite coming through. All right. So here's a review of your previous lecture on sentence structure. Why am I going over the same lesson again? Because in this week's lecture, I will introduce to you the last sentence structure in English. So far, I have introduced three kinds of sentences in English: simple, compound, and complex. And that's all that you had on your quizzes. You didn't have to know compound, complex. But the very last sentence structure is known as the compound complex sentence. And so here, a brief review of what is a simple sentence. So a simple sentence is a subject plus verb plus object. A sentence is a complete thought, also known as an independent clause. So I'm going to repeat this again, just in case the last time I did it, I had bad audio. So Jack gets good grades. Jack is the subject, get is the verb, good is the adjective, grades is the object. So this is a simple sentence. And then the only time an adjective comes after a subject is when you have the verb is. Jack is tall, and so tall refers back to how tall, to the noun Jack. Up the hill sits an old house. And so a prepositional phrase, up the hill, indicates location. Whenever you have something that indicates location, like across, at the store, up the hill, on the table, those are all known as prepositional phrases. And prepositional phrases are very common in a simple sentence. And so sometimes you will have the prepositional phrase at the beginning of the sentence. Up the hill, prepositional phrase, sits is a verb, and an old house is the subject. So here you have prepositional verb, prepositional phrase, verb, and subject. Here you have the old house sits up the hill. So that's a simple sentence. A compound sentence is when you have fanboys connecting two independent clauses. So a compound sentence has for, and, nor, but, nor, yet, so. And when you have a fanboys in the middle of two sentences, you have to have a comma. Jack gets good grades, for he studies hard. Jack is tall, but Mary is short. Steve gambles all the time, yet he rarely loses at the casinos. Oh, I wish that was the case with me. But anyway, and then a complex sentence is when you have a subordinating conjunction with a dependent clause with an independent clause. And it is the subordinating conjunction that makes the independent clause dependent. So whenever you have after, although, as long as though, because, before, even though, if, in order, now that, once, rather than, since, so that, then, that, though, unless, until, when, whenever, where, any of these words in front of a complete sentence, then you have a dependent clause. And if you just have a dependent clause as your sentence without an independent clause, then you have a sentence fragment. And this is still a very common error that I see in many essays. And so here you have a complex sentence. Oh, it should have a he. All right. And so you have a complex sentence when you have a dependent clause after John eats dinner, then you have a comma, and then you have an independent clause, he goes to bed. Although Jack is fat, dependent clause, then comma, he eats very little, independent clause. As soon as the alarm clock rings, this should have a comma. Steve jumps out of bed. And so whenever you have the dependent clause in the beginning of the sentence, you always have to have a comma. If you are missing a comma, I don't know why that's coming out in white. If you are missing a comma, then you have a comma splice. And so here, but if the dependent clause comes after the main sentence, then you don't need a comma. So here you have, although Jack is fat, comma, he eats very little. As soon as the alarm clock rings, comma, Steve jumps out of bed. If the subordinate conjunction, I just said that, okay. So here you have, when the dependent clause comes after the sentence, just like I just said, you don't have to have a comma. So John goes to bed after he eats dinner. He eats very little, although he is fat. Steve jumps out of bed as soon as the alarm clock rings. And all of the words in this table are all subordinating conjunctions. And then compound sentence. As the name suggests, a compound sentence brings both of these sentence forms together. In other words, a compound complex sentence is just that, in which you combine compound sentence with a complex sentence. Basically, you just add a dependent clause to your compound sentence structure, so that is, it contains at least, your compound complex sentence contains at least two independent clauses, just like a compound sentence structure, and then at least one dependent clause. And so here you would have Mary is rich. So that is a simple sentence. That is one independent clause. Then if you have Mary is rich, but John is poor. Here you have a compound sentence. Now, if I add in, while Mary is rich, that's also, and that's a complex sentence. While Mary is rich, John is poor. So a compound complex sentence is when you combine everything together. Mary, who is French, is very rich, but John, who is American, is very poor. And that's all it is. You thought it was something very complex or very hard to understand, when all it is just a relative clause. All you do is you just add a relative clause to your compound sentence, and voila, you have a compound complex sentence. And in English, this is the longest sentence you can have. If you have a sentence longer than this, then it becomes a run-on sentence, and then it becomes awkward. And so for those of you who come from other languages, where you could say Mary, who is French, who lives in Paris, who also owns a boutique, is very rich, but John, who is French, who is a handyman, and who also lives in Paris, is very poor. If you have too many who in English, that becomes very awkward. Whereas in Spanish, in Italian, and French, that's a perfectly good sentence. In French literature, I think there was one sentence that was like a compound complex sentence that lasted over 100 pages. And that's in Marcel Proust's À la recherche du temps perdu. I don't know how to say that in English, but it's Marcel Proust. So in French, you can have multiple relative clauses, but in English, you would have to say Mary, who is French, is very rich, but John, who is American, is very poor. And you have to remember to put in your Mary, who is French. I'm actually missing the commas, Mary, who is French. So you have to remember to put in your appositive commas, one comma before the who, and one comma after American. And then here you have your appositive relative clause, which is the long grammar for it. And so here, Mary is very rich, but John is very poor. That would be the compound sentence structure. And then as soon as I add in who is French and who is American, that makes it complex because I'm adding in a dependent clause. So as soon as I add in a dependent clause into a compound sentence structure, that makes it a compound complex sentence. So remember, a complex sentence is when you have a dependent clause with an independent clause. So as soon as I add in the dependent clauses to my compound sentences, then you have a compound complex sentence. Most of you have probably seen this kind of structure when you read books. Mary, who is French, is very, so this is the longest sentence that you can have in English. Just as I was saying that, the person who was making these kind of mistakes suddenly showed up. Yeah, so Mary, who is French, is very rich, but John, who is American, is very poor. So that is the longest. And I was just saying to Candace that in French and Spanish, you could say Mary, who is French, who owns a bakery, who is a millionaire, is very rich. But John, who is American, who is a handyman, and who is in love with Mary, is very poor. And you can't have all those who's in English. It sounds awkward. In English, you would just say Mary, who is French, is very rich, but John, who is American, is very poor. And so here you have, I know I'm repeating myself, and people were saying, well, how come you repeat yourself so many times? That's because as different students come in, I repeat myself so that student who came in could also get the extra lecture. Although for the person who was here and for the person who's watching the lecture recording, that does sound repetitive. So I do apologize for that. Anyway, Erin loves her brother, and he loves her too because she pays his bills. This is an example of a compound complex sentence because you have Erin loves her brother and he loves her too. This is the compound sentence because you have an independent clause, Erin loves her brother. Then you have the fanboys conjunction, and then you have another independent clause. So that makes a compound sentence. Then as soon as you add a dependent clause, because she pays his bills, then this entire sentence becomes a compound complex sentence. So that would be the first time I've said that. The dog ran off when I chased him, but I didn't care. So the dog ran off would be one independent clause. Then you have fanboys, but, and then you have I didn't care, another independent clause. That makes it a compound sentence. And then when you add a dependent clause, when I chased him, then this whole thing becomes a compound complex sentence. And when I say that this is the longest sentence you can have in English, and people in other languages are going to say, that's not very long. That's still a very short sentence. And they'll also say that in my language, that would still be considered a simple sentence. Yeah, I can just hear, am I correct or what? This is very short. This is very short in other languages.
Yes, that sounds proper to me. That sounds like a good sentence and a short sentence.
Yes, because English is very, very short and linear and concise. And they also say that language reveals the culture of the people who originated this language. And both British culture and American culture value things that are short, fast, and on time. So therefore, the language also is short and fast. I wouldn't say on time. Whereas more like Italy or France, the language is more flowing, much longer, because in those cultures, it's okay to come late to your party. It's okay to come late to the dinner party and everybody relaxes. You're even late for your business meeting, that's okay. And it's more relaxed so that the language itself is more relaxed. And so in linguistics, they believe that the way grammar or the language is composed linguistically, that reflects the culture of that language. So a relaxed culture has a more flowing language, whereas a more concise and punctual culture like America or Britain has a shorter language. And if you want to look that up, that's Wardorf. Okay, I will email that one, but I know it is definitely linguistics. Though my mother says it doesn't matter, I am tall. Oh, though my mother says it doesn't matter, I am tall and she is short. And so here you have a dependent clause. Though my mother says it doesn't matter, that whole thing is a dependent clause. Then I am tall and she is short. That's the compound sentence. So when you add the whole thing together, though my mother says it doesn't matter, I am tall and she is short, that's about the longest you can have in English. And like I said, it still sounds really short if I were to ask my French students. I remember teaching French students this structure, or Spanish students for that matter. They all laughed at me and saying, oh, in French and Spanish, it's way longer than that, and stuff like that. So anyway, compound complex sentences are the most complicated sentence in English, as their name implies. A compound complex sentence has at least two independent clauses and at least one dependent clause. In simple terms, an independent clause can be a sentence on its own, while a dependent clause cannot. And so a compound complex sentence helps us express longer, more complicated thoughts with more parts than other sentences. They're good tools for explaining complicated ideas or describing long chains of events. So a compound complex sentence, this is considered very long for a British person and very long for an American person. And when these instructions were written, that's also written from an American or a British point of view. Here's some more examples of a simple, complex, compound, and compound complex sentence. So a simple sentence would be, the severe storms caused a record number of tornadoes. That's one simple sentence. Cooler La Nina temperatures were part of the cause. So here you have two simple sentences. And so in English, we would feel the need to combine these two simple sentences so that it doesn't sound so choppy. And so there are many ways in which you can combine these two simple sentences. You can either combine it by using a subordinating conjunction. Although the severe storms caused a record number of tornadoes, cooler La Nina temperatures were part of the cause. So you'll notice that in the complex and the compound sentence, it sounds much better, more flowing in English than just having two simple sentences. And most students, not most, a lot of students write too many simple sentences, and you need a conjunction, either a subordinating conjunction or a coordinating conjunction or a transition word to put your sentences together so that your essay doesn't sound so choppy. And so if you want a complex sentence, here that means although severe storms caused a record number of tornadoes, cooler La Nina temperatures were part of the cause. That's how it would be read. The first sentence, a dependent clause, is considered not that important and minor, and then you want to put emphasis on cooler La Nina temperatures were part of the cause of why there were so many tornadoes. So if you want to put emphasis, uneven emphasis, you would use a complex sentence. If you want to join two sentences together and you want them both to have equal importance. So here, if I were to read this, I would say the severe storms caused a record number of tornadoes and the cooler La Nina temperatures were part of the cause. And so then you have two sentences of equal importance tied together with a coordinating conjunction. This is a subordinating conjunction. This is a coordinating conjunction. And so when you coordinate something, they're both the same. And now, so as a writer, you have the choice of either using a complex sentence where you want something that's dependent, something that's not emphasized, and something that is emphasized, or you want the reader to have to understand that both facts are of equal importance. That's why you learn this stylistically, so that as a writer, you can make the choice of which sentence you want more emphasis and which sentence you don't want more emphasis. And then, of course, if you want a compound complex sentence and you want to add in a little bit more, then you would use another dependent clause. Although the severe storms caused a record number of tornadoes, that's a dependent clause, cooler La Nina temperatures were part of the cause, and next year should see fewer, less severe storms. So they were able to add in, and next year should see fewer, less severe storms, and they added in a dependent clause. And so here you would have the compound sentence, which is cooler La Nina temperatures were part of the cause, and next year should see fewer, less severe storms. That's the compound sentence. And then although the severe storms caused a record number of tornadoes, that is the dependent clause. So when I add a dependent clause to my compound sentence, that becomes compound complex. And so this is the longest sentence you can have in English. You cannot have multiple dependent clauses, which is very common among Spanish speakers who make that kind of mistake. Too many relative clauses in a row is also not correct. And so now I'm done with all the sentence structure, and I'm done with agenda number 1, which is the introduction of the compound complex sentence. Now I'm going to move on to a completely different topic. Is how to write comparison, contrast. We did this already, so this is just a review of a comparison, contrast, transition words that you could use in different sentence structures for your comparison, contrast final draft. And so here, I will ask you, are these simple, compound, or complex sentences? So in contrast to New York State, stale Mexican food, California has fresher, tastier Mexican food. So I would ask you guys, is this a simple, compound, or complex sentence? Candace, is this a simple, compound, or complex sentence?
Which one did you read again? I was trying
Number one. In contrast to New York's stale Mexican food, California has fresher Mexican, tastier Mexican food. Is that a simple, compound, or complex sentence?
It's a sample.
Very good. Okay, number 2, New York has stale Mexican food while California has fresher, tastier Mexican food. So, Mariah, which one is that? Is that simple, compound, or complex?
I do not know. I'm sorry. I
That's
don't
okay.
know the difference.
The difference is that the word while is a subordinating conjunction. And so if you know all your subordinating conjunctions, then you know what is a complex sentence and what is a compound sentence. And the difference is in the way you would talk. New York has stale Mexican food, while California has fresher, tastier Mexican food. So that means that I want to emphasize the fact that New York food sucks, but California has better food. In other words, then this part's not as, for some reason, the writer thinks this is not as important, but this part is important. And so the way you know if something is a complex sentence is by memorizing or knowing your subordinating conjunction list, which is why I told students you should get a subordinating, that's while over there, you should get a subordinating conjunction list and become familiar with it. That way, when you are a writer, you know what sentence you want to emphasize. So if I have, what's number 3? New York, I could tell you it's not complex. I'll give you that.
It's a compound.
It's a compound sentence because however is what kind of word? What kind of conjunction? It's not really a conjunction. It's a transition word. So transitional words always come in compound sentences. And when you have a transition word, then you are emphasizing the second sentence. Okay. And then when you use and, but, for, so, and no, that, then you are equal. Both of them are equal. And when you are, I guess that's kind of confusing. All right. So number 4, is that a compound, complex, or a simple sentence? Forget whose turn it was.
It's her turn. I just went, but it's a complex.
It's complex, yes. And so, and then this one, everybody knows is compound because I gave it away. All right. And so, unlike New York, California has fresh Mexican food. Is that simple, compound, or complex?
Would it be simple?
Yes, excellent. Yes. Because here you have a prepositional phrase, subject, verb, object. Okay, number 7, California has better Mexican food than New York. Is that simple, compound, or complex?
Simple.
Simple.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
You was right. Simple.
yeah, you both got it right at the same time. Great minds think together, think alike. The stale New York Mexican food differs vastly from the fresher, tastier California Mexican food. Is that simple, compound, or complex?
I think it's still simple.
It's still simple. Excellent. New York has stale Mexican food. Nevertheless, California has fresh Mexican food.
Compound.
Compound, because that's a transition word. That's why you have to memorize your transitional word list. You can always get a transitional word list from Google by Googling transitional word list. You can also Google subordinating conjunction list. So that way you know how to construct your sentences. So basically in all of this, I wanted to prove that you can you can write your comparison contrast essay using all different sentence structures for the same thing, depending on it all depends on what conjunction you use. Whether you use a subordinating conjunction, that makes it a complex sentence like while. If you use however, that's going to turn it into a compound sentence. And if you go back to although, you make it back into a complex sentence. And therefore, every time you use a subordinating conjunction like this, you make this sentence less important than this sentence. So it's all a matter of style. What kind of message do you want to give to your reader? So do you want everything emphasized the same, or do you want to emphasize just one sentence? So that's why you would change your style, your stylistics, and that's why you avoid sentence fragments too, when you know the difference between your simple, compound, or complex sentences. Now we're going to switch completely to another topic. It has nothing to do with transition words or subordinating conjunctions or anything like that. Now we're going to study different kinds of introduction paragraphs. So right now, up till now, you've only studied the funnel introduction, where the funnel is where you give you introduced your thesis statement with a few sentences, and then you lead up to your thesis statement, and you put your thesis statement last. And so that's what we've been doing in both our essays. However, there's two other kinds of introduction paragraphs. There's also a turnabout introduction paragraph and a dramatic entrance introduction paragraph. And so here, a funnel introduction paragraph: America is a throwaway society. From both industrial and municipal sources, the United States generates about 10 billion metric tons of solid waste per year. The average American discards in amount of waste equal to the Statue of Liberty. Evidently, Americans throw away a lot of garbage that should be recycled, but most garbage ends up in landfills. In fact, repercussions of excess waste stretches to every city from New York to Los Angeles. Therefore, it is a duty of every American to find a way to reuse garbage. Thus, the only way to reuse garbage is through recycling. Recycling garbage saves the environment because plastic water bottles can be reused. Okay, and then when you use your three different reasons, and you have sentences, then you use semicolons to separate your sentences, because a semicolon means and. So less garbage will end up in landfills, semicolon, and future generations will be able to enjoy an earth that is less polluted with garbage. So this becomes your thesis statement, and this should not have two C's. And so recycling garbage, should it have two C's? Oh, it does. Okay. Recycling garbage, that's the topic, controlling idea, and then you have your three reasons. The second kind of introduction paragraph is when you use a turnabout. A turnabout is when you write the opposite point of view first, and then you write your thesis statement. So let's say your thesis statement is smoking is dangerous for your health. Then you write the opposite point of view first, and then you write your thesis statement is the reality, is however, that's the reality. And so here you have, so you write the opposite point of view first. Many young people think smoking is glamorous. After all, young people see celebrities smoking in movies. Old-time movies in black and white feature Betty Davis and Cary Grant lighting up. And rock stars light up in commercials, which is misspelled, okay, in magazines show cowboys smoking Marlboro cigarettes. As a result, young people associate smoking with maturity, elegance, good health, and sophistication. Reynolds Cigarettes even offers strawberry-flavored cigarettes to entice young people to smoke. And cigarette vendors claim electronic cigarettes are harmless as it emits water vapor instead of smoke like a regular cigarette. Young people come away with the idea that smoking is good for you. It's harmless. And now you hone in on your thesis statement. However, smoking, or in reality, you would write, however, in reality, smoking causes lung cancer, stomach cancer, and throat cancer. So you see that by talking about the opposite point of view, and then you do a turnabout, and then you write your thesis statement, it emphasizes it. It puts a light on your thesis statement. So that's another way of writing your introduction paragraph. So you can still do that for your comparison contrast essay. You would write, some people think dogs, cats are great pets. Some people think that cats are great. You write all these examples why cats are great pets, but in reality, I prefer dogs over cats because something like that. So you could still use the turnabout for your comparison contrast essay. All it does is it emphasizes your thesis statement. And then the third kind of introduction paragraph is when you use a story. And if you're going to write about, say, COVID-19 is worse than the flu, then you would write about a COVID patient. And it's usually something very, very sad. And I've done that. I've read a lot of nurses writing about this topic, and they actually use actual experiences from what they saw in their ward. And so if you want to use that kind of, that's known as a dramatic entrance. So then you would have COVID is really terrible because, you know, after 2 or 3 days, hospitals are filled with COVID patients. People have ventilators down their throats, whereas during the average flu season, you don't see 90% of the, you know, population in hospitals, which is what's happening in LA right now. We have like 90% capacity. Some people, some districts here in LA, we have no beds. So here you would use a story to introduce your thesis statement. Betty sits in her wheelchair with a tube sticking out of her throat. She now uses that tube for breathing since her lung and nose cancer has eroded and destroyed her nasal passages. After 60 years of smoking, Betty has terminal nose and throat cancer. However, she does not want anybody else to suffer this sad fate, especially her grandchildren. She waits patiently as the cameraman prepares the camera for the most important Just Say No smoking ad. The cameraman motions to her to speak. Betty starts to speak. My name is Betty Smith. I began smoking at the age of 14. Now I am 60 and I'm dying a horrible slow death due to lung and throat cancer. I no longer have a nose to breathe out of, and I now have to breathe through a tube. I do not have much more time to live. Please do not start smoking if you want to avoid my fate. Just say no when somebody offers you a cigarette because your life depends on it. As the commercial closes, Betty heaves a sigh of relief and that maybe she has saved one of her grandchildren's life. Indeed, smoking is harmful to one's health because smoking causes lung cancer, throat cancer, and stomach cancer. So you can use an anecdote to. So I use the same thesis statement for all of these. You can either use in funnel. You can either use facts to introduce your thesis statement. In a turnabout, you offer the other person's point of view, and then you write your reality of, however, this is the correct way of smoking is actually bad for you. And then, or you can have dramatic entrance where you use an anecdote. And in some people would actually write part of the anecdote in the introduction. And then in the conclusion, you would write something like, 3 weeks after this commercial, Betty passed away. In other words, you write what's the rest of this anecdote, the ending of the anecdote in your conclusion. So that was on your, I think I posted somebody's video who actually mentioned that you can mirror your what's in your introduction into your conclusion. I'll go over that in a minute. So these are the 3 different kinds of introduction paragraphs. Now you have different kinds of body paragraphs. You have 4 different kinds of body paragraphs. You have narrative, descriptive, expository, and persuasive. And actually, we've gone over all 4 kinds of body paragraphs in this class. An expository body paragraph just mainly gives you facts about what happened, so that it describes, illustrates, justifies your thesis. And you are providing factual information to back up your thesis statement. And everything relates back to the thesis statement. Narrative body paragraph is when you talk about events based on your own life. And so in this case, if you're a nurse talking about COVID-19, you would base your narrative body paragraph on what you've seen during your career. Whereas if you're going to use an expository body paragraph, you would use facts about other people. You would say that according to Dr. Smith, he saw patient X and he found research about something. So when you're talking about somebody else and case studies, that's when you use an expository body paragraph. When you're talking about yourself, and your experiences to prove your thesis. That's called a narrative body paragraph. And then a persuasive body paragraph, well, you can say, but aren't these both persuasive? Yes. All of these styles can be mixed and matched. I believe someone asked me, can one style be part of another? Yes. So technically, an expository paragraph can also be a persuasive paragraph. A narrative paragraph can also be a persuasive paragraph because as a nurse, you're trying to persuade the people that COVID is a very serious ailment. So yes, so you can mix and match actually all of these different types of paragraphs. Once you learn what each type is, then it's the same thing with this. You can mix and match this. You can mix and match all the different essay types. But first you have to learn what each essay type is. And eventually what you'll do is you'll even learn to put your thesis statement not at the end of your first paragraph, but at the beginning of your second paragraph, or even at the very end of your essay. Okay, not in this class, but if you were taking a more advanced class, writing class, a creative writing class, they will teach you how to put the thesis statement in different parts of the essay. So that goes beyond the realm of this lecture. So anyway, so you got different kinds of body paragraphs. You got the expository, narrative, persuasive, and descriptive is when we did our week 3, that food game that everybody had fun doing. And this is when we use adjectives which evoke our 5 senses: seeing, hearing, and that sort of thing. And you draw a picture of that experience and put the reader into that experience. And the more you can put the reader, and this goes for all of these. So a descriptive paragraph can be a narrative paragraph. A descriptive paragraph can be a persuasive paragraph. So yes, once again, I go back to the example of the nurse talking about the COVID patient. You can be persuasive by telling the horrors of what happened, and then you be descriptive in the stink and smell of what it's like for that. And also, it's not just the 5 senses, also your emotions, how you feel. That also goes into descriptive. And so these two actually goes into the first two, because the first two are more a broader definition. Because you could also say all of these, you could say are all expository, because expository simply means that you give facts, you give information. And in all of these paragraphs, you are giving information. So I know I'm confusing you, but basically you can mix and match, and that the labels, one label for one paragraph can also describe the label for another paragraph. And so for body paragraphs, as long as all your body paragraphs relate back to your thesis, then you have a good essay structure. And the last thing, I'm going to talk about, I think this is the last thing I'm going to talk about. So the last thing I'm going to talk about before I talk about your comparison contrast assignment is the different kinds of conclusion paragraphs. And so the one that we've been using so far in all our essays is known as the summary conclusion paragraph. So a summary conclusion paragraph is the simplest and most common form of conclusion. In this format, you restate the thesis and summarize its main points. You end with a strong recommendation. So here you have smoking causes lung cancer, stomach cancer, and throat cancer. You don't have to have the exact words of your thesis statement. You can reword it to make it sound, better. Smoking is dangerous because it causes all of this. You can change it, reword it. But you restate your thesis statement, and then you highlight the summary highlights of your essay. People who smoke have a higher chance of getting these cancers. Smoking has cancer-causing ingredients like nicotine, which destroys the lungs, stomach, and the throat. People who smoke all their lives end up with a tube in their throat and a shorter lifespan. Do not be fooled by the celebrities and the glamour movies. Smoking is not good for your health. Avoid smoking or vaping at all costs. Quit smoking as soon as possible. And so here, I also call to action. That's what it's called. It's when I'm telling the reader what to do, how to avoid getting all of this cancer, and what to do for the future. That's also, in other words, and also trying to solve the dilemma or whatever problem you have in your topic. So that is called a summary conclusion paragraph. And a recommendation, which is sort of what I did in the last part of my summary, a recommendation conclusion suggests possible changes that can be implemented to improve the situation you have described. What actions can you propose to improve the situation? And so here, smoking causes lung cancer, stomach cancer, and throat cancer. If people quit smoking, they can have a longer lifespan. I recommend people consult their doctors to find out ways to quit smoking. You can research quit smoking support groups so that you can find other people like you who are all quitting smoking together. You can chew nicotine gum to lessen the urge to smoke and then quit smoking little by little. You can also wear a nicotine patch, which releases gradually nicotine into your blood slowly to get you off the habit of smoking a cigarette. So that's known as a recommendation conclusion paragraph. A prediction, and then the next kind of paragraph is a prediction conclusion paragraph. Here you want to predict the future. So I did a little bit, when I did the summary, I did a little bit of recommendation, I did a little bit of future. So yes, you can mix and match these styles, in case you're wondering. So a prediction conclusion in which although it is oriented toward the future, it should not consist of unsubstantiated new claims. So here, smoking causes all these cancers. Once you quit smoking, you will be able to lead a healthier life. You can live to see your children get married. You can get rid of your smoker's cough. You will be able to breathe easier and exercise more. You don't have to worry that your secondhand smoke will harm your children or your wife. You don't have to leave the building to go outside to smoke. So you can stay in your office to get more work done, and you can climb the stairs without losing your breath. So here you have a prediction conclusion paragraph. Can I put these predictions into my summary paragraph? Yes. Can I put my recommendations into my summary paragraph? Yes. The summary paragraph is the most general of all the summaries, of all the conclusion paragraphs, just like the funnel is the most general of all the introduction paragraphs. Okay, so then the last one, it's not the last one. Okay, then the next one is called a full circle conclusion. A full circle conclusion picks up an idea or image suggested in the introduction and echoes it in the conclusion. Such a conclusion might also refer back to an anecdote or example mentioned previously and show how it is still relevant. Full circle conclusions provide a satisfactory solution to the problem you have raised. And so in one of my anecdote, dramatic entrance story, introduction paragraphs, I talked about Betty. Like she sits in a wheelchair, she does a commercial, and she's breathing through a tube as she does the commercial, and then she tells her grandchildren not to end up like her, not to smoke. So that would be the beginning of that anecdote, and then in your conclusion paragraph, you can mention Betty again. So going back to Betty, shortly after she made her stop smoking commercial, she passed away of lung cancer. Betty was glad she was able to get the message out about the dangers of smoking to her children and grandchildren. She was worried about her grandson who had just started smoking. She wanted that grandson to quit smoking so he would not die of lung cancer like she did. She hoped that seeing the commercial would enable him to quit smoking or something like that. So that's called a full circle because you've come full circle, basically. You started with Betty in your essay, and then you end with Betty in your essay. So that's known as a full circle conclusion. And then the last kind of conclusion is a quotation conclusion, in which you use a really striking and shocking, well, not shocking, informative quotation. So a quotation conclusion is a strategy for getting and keeping the reader's attention. Using this form of conclusion ends your paper uniquely and memorably. So I'm not sure if this is not the best quotation, but you get the idea. So smoking causes lung cancer and all the cancers. Then I used a quotation. Did you know 80% of smokers who start smoking in their teens die of lung cancer before the age of 60? Then you got to remember to put in your in-text citation. A lot of people didn't quite understand that in their week 10 assignment. It is true that if you start smoking as a teen, you will die before you reach retirement. Why die so young? It is better to avoid becoming an early statistic by quitting smoking early. When another teenager offers you a cigarette, just say no. Don't become part of the 80% smokers who die young needlessly. Lead a healthy, non-smoking life by never starting to smoke in the first place. Just say no, or whatever. So here, what I did was I created a conclusion based around this this quotation. So you can do that too. You know, it's so a quotation conclusion. You could try any of these, or you could put them all together, mix and match. That one conclusion could actually have little bits and pieces of each and every one of these. Then you would have a very satisfying conclusion. If you were such a good writer that you could combine, you don't have to though. So I split them all up so you could see the different ways in which you can write a conclusion. And that's it for the different kinds of conclusions, different kinds of body paragraphs, and different kinds of introduction paragraphs. Are there any questions so far?
No, I think you answered all the questions that I had.
Is this all a review of what you learned in school already?
Yeah, it was just like basically a refresher for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember learning a lot of this in, well, high school. I learned the funnel. I remember I learned that in grammar school. Then I learned all the other stuff in high school. And then I remember learning the summary conclusion in grammar school. Then in, I guess, high school and junior high, I learned all the others. Something like, they always teach you the easiest ones first in grammar school. And then they put everything together in high school. So by the time I finish this class, I've reached high school, supposedly high school level. This should be 12th grade, I think. Anyway, at least that's what it was in New York State, where I went. So the last part of this, and the very last, thank goodness, part of your week 12 lecture is going to be about your comparison contrast. It's the difference between revision and proofreading. And so when we always revise first before proofreading. Revise your work primarily for clarity. In other words, you revise for essay structure first. So when I grade, I always grade people's essay structure first because your essay structure counts the most. I'd say 80% of your grade is essay structure, and then 20% of your grade is grammar, which is proofreading. So that's why you should always revise your essay, in other words, for essay structure, before you proofread. So always revise before, that's the magic formula. Revise essay structure before you proofread for grammar. Because if your essay doesn't make any sense, that is, if you have bad essay structure, then what's the point of somebody reading your essay that makes no sense? Or if somebody can't make heads or tails of what exactly is she talking about? What is that? Did she even have a main idea? I don't know, So you don't want your reader scratching their head trying to figure out what it is you wrote. That's why people do revision first. And I just want to congratulate, and here are some guidelines of what you can revise for, like a checklist. So you can read, make sure you have good APA claims, make sure you understand where your sources come from, make sure your sources follow Kapow, things like that. And then reread your assignment to make sure you have good body paragraphs, good stylistics, make sure that your thesis statement is at the end of your first paragraph, all of that. And then after you know that your essay structure is solid, then you can try and proofread. Proofreading is when people give it to their spouse for proofreading. You can even run it through Grammarly if you want to see if that helps. Some students seem to go, or you can go to Smart Thinking, and they can look at it free. I think there's a 48-hour turnaround. Have you guys tried using Smart Thinking? No?
Nope,
No.
I haven't used it yet.
I know somebody in our class who did, and so that's proofreading.
I'm going to eventually use it. I just wasn't quite sure how to use it, but then you showed us how, so I'm good for next semester.
Yeah, I guess if you have a more complicated paper than comparison contrast, like if you're writing a biology paper, like a science paper, you want to make sure, of course the tutor may not know science, but she can make sure that you make sense, or you can add that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And that's what I have next semester, biology. Oh, Lord. And anatomy, too, because I already passed anatomy 1, so I transferred some credits over. But
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm so
Yeah.
scared of biology.
Well, I've had a student tell me that as he was taking, but he took biology at the same time he took this class, he said that he was able to easily transfer the 5-paragraph essay structure into his biology paper. He was able to get an A on his biology paper. He was so excited.
Oh,
You
that's
Yes,
good.
I just did biology with this too, and
It really
it
helped.
helped. Yes, it helped a lot with a lot of the stuff that I had to write.
Wow, that's cool. Maybe one of these days you could tell me what topics your biology teacher has, so that way I can include it into my lectures to help future students. So you can email me that.
Can I
Peter,
ask her a question real quick, Professor H?
sure.
It's was your biology with Fortis, was it totally online, or did you have to go in? Because like here in the state of Indiana, all schools are shut down, and I just want to know what to expect going into the next semester.
Oh,
Ours,
you better
ours
ask
were online,
Mariah.
but we're not sure for next semester.
You're not sure about what?
Oh, for online. From what I'm understanding, next semester is going to be all online.
Yeah, I don't know about next year. I don't know if they're going to switch back to next year, switch back to face to face and that sort of thing. Do you know?
I'm not sure, but labs are supposed to be on ground. But right after Christmas break, like you can keep checking. It should say on ground or not.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
For UCLA, some classes were easy to switch to online, but then classes that had labs, classes that had stuff that you had to do online, those were the slowest. And I think even now there were still some labs they still have to do on campus at UC. It was such a mess when UCLA suddenly had to go remote all of a sudden like that. It just threw everybody. That's you should have been there. Anyway, oh well, you are. You it's just a different school. Anyway, I'll talk about that at a different time. Let's see. Oh yeah, so for your week 12, you already know how to do this. Do you have any questions for your week 12 comparison contrast essay? So here's your rubric, 20 points for a good essay structure. Actually, it's 40 points for good essay structure and 20 points for strong topic sentence that addresses this means your thesis statement has 3 solid reasons and everything, your topic sentences relate back to your thesis statement. 20 points for high quality information relates back to the thesis in compelling ways and you have transition words. Another 20 points for rich vocabulary. And here your grammar is worth, see, like I said, 80 points is for essay structure and tone, and only 20 points is worth grammar. So that's why you always revise first. And this doesn't matter if it's an English paper, a biology paper, any kind of paper. You always want to make sure you have one main idea first, because that's 80% of why somebody wants to read. And then 20% is grammar to make sure you don't look uneducated. And then here you have, and if you want to know more about APA, you'll be using a lot of APA in your biology. Did you use a lot of APA in your biology, Em?
Yes, I did. And I actually didn't do that on my first paper. And it wasn't that big of a deal because they weren't as strict in the beginning, but it really helped. Everything you taught me really, really helped me in that class.
And then after you go for your AA, if you go for your BA and your MA, APA becomes even more important because you'll be writing more and more longer and longer research papers. So I remember writing papers 25 pages, even though the teacher only wanted 15 pages. I tend to write too much, as you could tell by these lectures. I do a lot.
Professor
That hasn't changed.
Professor H, have you heard of this? I bought this handbook to help me with the writing style. It's called the Little Seagull Handbook. Have you heard of that?
Which handbook?
It's called the Little Seagull Handbook.
Probably. There's so many handbooks. There's an APA manual. There's so many handbooks. Why don't you email me the title and I'll tell you more. But there's also a Little Blue Handbook. There's so many of them. There's also Diana Hacker Handbook, also has a lot of APA, MLA, and Chicago Turabian, all 3 of them. So, and then if you want to write something longer than the 5-paragraph essay structure, then all you have to do is transfer this paragraph 1 into chapter 1, chapter 2, it's that simple. Your thesis statement, the introduction, will just become your introduction, like the forward, the very beginning of your, it's before chapter 1. Then chapter 1, which could be 50 pages, is you all talk about lung cancer and smoking. And then chapter 2, another 50 pages about stomach cancer. And the chapter 3 would be about throat cancer. And then your conclusion chapter. But you have to make sure that all your chapters evenly has the same amount of pages. Otherwise, your book will look very uneven. So 50 pages, 50 pages. If you're writing a dissertation, this is when you get to the graduate level, then you would have 5 pages, 5 pages, 5 pages. In other words, everything becomes a heading. Part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and you would just have a big heading in big letters, lung cancer. And you write several paragraphs, 4 or 5 paragraphs about lung cancer. Then you have heading number 2, and you have 4 or 5 paragraphs about, you get the idea. So that's basically, you can write 1,000 pages using the same. And why do we use the same structure? Because English is a linear language. If you speak any other language, most other languages are either like Hebrew, like in the Bible, it's more of a zigzag. Hebrew is very zigzag, like parables. And Chinese is more of a circular kind of a language. But English is just a straight arrow going straight down. This was my linguistics teacher teaching all the different languages of the world. And he drew pictures. He drew an arrow, he drew circles, and then he drew a zigzag. And so that's why if you learn this one structure, then it's just one arrow down. And then when you're speaking, let's say you're doing a PowerPoint, then your first PowerPoint slide will be your thesis statement. Second slide will talk about lung cancer. Your third slide will talk about stomach cancer. No more than 5. Most speeches more like 5 slides, 6, 7 slides. Beyond that, people fall asleep, actually. And so people have very short attention spans. And so once again, I'm still using the 5-paragraph essay structure for doing my PowerPoint, for writing my book, doing my PhD dissertation, doing my MA dissertation, whatever. And so you can use this because that's the way English is very, very linear. Even Latin languages have a little zigzag. Not as zigzaggy as Hebrew, okay? That's way zigzag. It's a little bit zigzag. It's like a little zigzag with an arrow attached to it. That would be more like Latin languages. But English is just that straight arrow down. It's the easiest of all the languages to learn how to write the structure. So I wrote it all down, what I just said, chapter 1 is lung cancer, chapter 2, and all that. Did I go too fast?
No.
No, I didn't go too fast. You understand? I didn't just, sometimes they tell me that I go way too fast, and then everyone's going, huh? Like that. And so same thing, if you're going to write a book about I love my childhood, then chapter 1 is about how you did nothing but freedom. That's what you would name it, freedom. And then you would talk about I play tag all day and all that kind of stuff. Adventure and playtime. I actually believe my neighbor's yard was Camelot of King Arthur. I thought I was in another kingdom. That's how imaginative I was as a kid. And then, of course, I made lifelong friends and so on and so forth. So yeah, so you can use this for, and this is interesting. So once you finish, if you want to continue writing, you can also become a medical writer. And then you got to think, who wrote these articles? How science beat the virus. Here's why vaccinated people still need, it's usually a combination of doctors, scientists, nurse practitioners, and nurses. A combination of those kind of people. And usually the more medical knowledge you know, and when you write a medical article, the more the magazines want to hire you because you sound credible. Remember Kapow when I said C is for currency, A is for author. So if you're an author and you say that you have medical training, you're a nurse, you're a doctor or whatever, and then you get to go out and write these articles, you have a lot of credibility, and then people want to hire you. And so these would be the kind of articles you can write. you see. I got this off of Bing. And so here, there's a whole article about how you can go into medical writing, how to become a competent medical writer. And of course, I don't think you can make $1 gazillion doing this, you know, but it's an interesting, I guess, side gig is what I'm told. And if you want to do something different, and to something else, you can do medical journalism, medical education, medical marketing of healthcare products. And what kind of conclusion am I doing for this whole week 12 instructor session? This is a kind of conclusion because I'm concluding by telling you the future. Which conclusion paragraph am I referring back to? Prediction. I'm doing a future prediction conclusion by saying this could be your future. You know, a call for action, which is true. You could actually go into medical writing. You can go into, of course, I don't know how you can get the job. That part you would have to tell me. But I do know that a lot of nurses, especially the ones who are really angry and pissed off at people not wearing their masks, having boats on parties, maskless, and then everybody's got the capacity of the hospital. They write these articles, and then you can go into medical journalism. You can go into medical education. You can sell healthcare products. You can go in, you could do journal articles, abstracts. There's even a book that says how nurses can publish and do research or something like. There's a whole book about some nurse wrote a whole book about that, which I'll include into this next time. And so you can read through all of this. Now, who requires medical? I'm not going to read through this. I'm just going to show you. And then I'll give you this whole lecture notes, and you can read it yourself. And requirements for becoming a medical and therapeutic area knowledge. And the knowledge of all of this, which you have to know as a nurse, you have to know about pharmacology, drugs, all of this stuff. And just like anything else, you have to know you have to have good grammar. You have to have good APA. You have to have good ethical issues. Oh, of course, that's a favorite one for you to do. Cloning. Should we clone? What if we could clone real people? What would be the ethical? And then people with medical knowledge would then chime in with, well, I think. So you could do ethical and legal issues. And here you have steps in writing a scientific document, training and professional resources for medical writing. And so, medical writing is both a science and an art. It requires an understanding in medical science and an aptitude for writing. In addition, a thorough knowledge of specific requirements for different types of medical documents and keeping up to date with the relevant guidelines this is the end of that. That's it. With relevant guidelines is a must. The demand for medical writing is growing steadily over the years. The pharmaceutical and healthcare industry offers a number of job opportunities for medical writers. So graduates and postgraduates in life sciences who have the right skills and aptitude can consider taking up medical writing as a full-time profession. That's because not many people bother to learn their anatomy, bother to learn so much medical stuff. You can have a layman like me write a medical article, but it would lack so much detail because for me, I would have to then suddenly become an expert in anatomy. And then my article would never have as much detail as your articles because you already know the anatomy and stuff like that. Plus you can add in your experiences to add more credibility. So this ends my total week 12 lecture. And I want to say, let me see, I could stop sharing. Yeah, and I just want to say that it's been a pleasure having all of you guys in my class, and hopefully we could see each other somewhere. I'm not sure where, and I'm not sure.
You will see me in California because I'm coming to visit. I've been trying to get to California. I've never been there. I just went to Vegas, but.
Oh yeah. My father loves to go to Vegas. It's like he practically wants to live there or something like that. But
oh wow!
For me, I think Vegas is too dull. I prefer a bookstore. Believe
you know what? This was my first time visiting, and it wasn't out hyped. It wasn't all like what I expected. Like I was really like thrown for a loop. So if I never visit there again, I'm good.
You're gonna have to do it after the pandemic, because right now we're going through some surge. Something like 1 in every 100 Californians or something is supposed to have COVID-19 or something. I'm
Oh
like,
wow, I want to go to that museum you was telling us about.
yeah, you got to wait until in my family, everyone's going to wait until after they get their shot or after the pandemic, because everybody wants to visit everybody, but you can't, you know?
Yeah, I'm a nurse. I'm a licensed practical nurse. I'm an LPN, so it's really scary out here right now. So I just had a baby a year ago, so I'm trying to make sure I don't bring nothing home to her or my 15-year-old son. So
Oh, that's got to be very, very, very stressful, because you don't want to bring it home to your family. But I remember reading an article about SARS, about Hong Kong, and that's why in China they were able to so fast react because they had the SARS, and it was about a nurse who said that she was afraid to bring home the SARS to her family. And before she would go inside her house, she had to take off all her medical clothes, leave it in the car or something, and take a shower in a far part of the house before she would even enter her house.
wow. See, when I come home, I take off my shoes and everything, but I go straight to the bathroom.
Yeah,
And
that's what she said.
I put my stuff in the washer immediately and just wash it.
Yes, that's what she said. Yeah, that's exactly what she said. That's what they did for SARS throughout, I guess for them, it was 2002. I forget exactly when SARS first hit. That's why when COVID-19 hit, they were more prepared than the United States. So that kind of thing. And so I was reading about, and it sounds very familiar to what everybody's doing now in the United States, nurses. You know, you're afraid to bring it home, and so you just yeah. And I'm like, yeah, they went through that in 2002. So been there, done that, and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I hope you guys have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
You too, and I hope next year at this time it's over. I mean, the pandemic, I mean, is over.
Yes, me too. I agree.
I agree.
Take care, and I hope you
Okay,
have,
Happy New Year. Okay, bye.
do well with your degree.
Okay, and you guys do well with your degree. Bye.